Hello, Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. When the Louisiana legislature went into session March 14th, few expected abortion to dominate much of the discussion. But now the issue has been part of the turmoil heard around the country. We'll be discussing that and other matters as the session nears the June 6th deadline. We'll also look at stalled plans on redeveloping the former Six Flags site, as well as a plan to allocate an income for kids and what to expect from allergy season. Plus, we will take a special look at the tragedy of three brothers who, a year ago, were murdered within a one-week span in two separate incidents. Joining us are tonight's informed sources: Tyler Bridges, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate; Charisse Gibson, news anchor and reporter, WWL-TV, Channel 4; Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter; and Ben Myers, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Let's go on over to Tyler right now and discuss what has been going on in our legislature, the Louisiana legislature, regarding the abortion issue and proposed legislation.
Yeah, Marcia, we had a wild couple of days where Louisiana is most definitely a pro-life state, one of the most anti-abortion states in the country. But we had a situation this past week where the anti-abortion forces were divided, and groups like Louisiana Right to Life, which traditionally, people who are pro-choice on abortion rights, they've always thought the Louisiana Right to Life and the other groups are too extreme. Well, they were actually outflanked. Those groups were this week by people on the extreme right, saying that they should be supportive of a bill by State Representative Danny McCormick, which would hold that if a woman had an abortion, that she could be charged with murder and sent to prison. And so the traditional anti-abortion group said, no, that really goes too far. And they were hoping that Representative McCormick, who's a Republican from Northwest Louisiana, they were hoping that Representative McCormick would withdraw the bill, but he is an uncompromising conservative, so he moved forward with it, and that's what happened in the House on Thursday night.
And so has some of that language in the bill or another bill been proposed that eliminates the language regarding homicide and the woman being criminally charged?
Right. After sort of a day of backroom negotiations, the Louisiana House gutted the McCormick bill, again, which could charge women with murder for having abortion. So they gutted that bill by simply replacing that bill with another anti-abortion bill. Representative McCormick, when he spoke to the House last night, said history would show which side you were on. And again, the traditional anti-abortion leaders were put in a very uncomfortable position where they were being told they weren't going far enough. And a number of people from out of town who were supporters of Representative McCormick's position that women should be charged for murder, they were very critical, criticizing the again traditional anti-abortion forces.
And what did the governor have to say about this?
Yeah, the governor spoke on Wednesday before the Baton Rouge Rotary Club. I covered him, and he said that Representative McCormick's bill was patently unconstitutional, just as the Right to Life groups had said as well. He said it's wrong-headed, it's not a good thing for the state. Again, the traditional anti-abortion groups were sort of beside themselves because they're very excited right now at the prospect, following the leaked memo or opinion from the Supreme Court, that abortion will, that Roe v. Wade will be overturned, and thanks to a 2006 trigger law in Louisiana, if Roe v. Wade is overturned nationwide, then Louisiana automatically bans abortions. So on the cusp of this incredible victory for the Right to Life movement that they've been fighting for years, they have this fight amongst themselves, which was finally settled in favor of the traditional anti-abortion forces.
And so this piece of legislation, it's just gone away, or was it referred back to the calendar? What procedure took place? So
after, again, Representative Danny McCormick, the sponsor of this very extreme piece of legislation, after the bill was amended over his objections, again, it was gutted. He then withdrew the bill, so it appears to be dead. And it's worth noting that this, what McCormick was trying to do, I think this may have been the most extreme piece of legislation introduced nationwide recently. His efforts received lots of attention in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other papers.
Yes, it did receive a lot of attention, and I've heard him interviewed on national radio. So it's essentially just not going to be considered at all this session. This is what you're saying right now?
Right, yeah, that's the way it looks. So I think the next move is we wait for the final opinion from the U.S. Supreme Court on the ruling whether they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. And again, if they do, then Louisiana's trigger law will immediately go into effect to make abortion in the state illegal.
Under all circumstances?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's talk quickly now about another issue, and that is legislation that's called Don't Say Gay. What has happened with that?
Right. You'll remember that similar legislation passed in Florida, caused a big kerfuffle there. Disney was very upset over that, and the legislature there overrode, and the governor overrode Disney's objections. So there was an effort to push forward in that in Louisiana, and again, Louisiana being a conservative state, one might have thought that would have advanced, but it died in committee. Actually, several Republicans joined with Democrats to defeat it. But through a parliamentary maneuver, the Don't Say Gay bill, that's what opponents call it, was given new life when the full House voted to, quote unquote, discharge the bill from committee, which is basically to override the defeat of that bill in committee. So right now that bill is before what's called the Committee of the House, which is essentially the whole House, but you can have bring in people to give testimony to the bill. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. My guess is the House leadership doesn't want to have too much attention brought to that bill, and they're going to find a way to maybe send it back to the Education Committee that it came and try to find a way to advance it maybe in another way.
And so bringing people to testify to it one way or the other, that's generally done in committee, so it would be very unusual for something like that to happen in the full House.
You're right. It would be very unusual, and it would bring a lot of attention to a bill that maybe the leadership would support, but I don't think they want to bring a lot of attention to it. It's not something I think that the Republican-minded conservatives want to see get too much attention.
Remind us again how much more time left in this regular session?
Yeah, the regular session ends on June 6th, so we're starting to wind down.
Okay, so a lot of matters to settle in a little bit of time.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, Tyler. All right, let's go on over to Ben right now. And we've heard plans on again, off again, on again, off again, on again, off again for the abandoned Six Flags site. You know, nothing's been happening there since Katrina. So kind of background us now about what is sort of happening.
Sure. So we are in the middle of the third attempt to redevelop this old amusement park that, like you said, has been abandoned since Hurricane Katrina. Previously, there were two attempts under Mayor Mitch Landrieu's administration. The first ended when the selected developer backed out. They were going to do an outlet mall there. A year after that developer backed out, there was another attempt through a competitive bid to redevelop again, but the city didn't like any of the proposals that it got, so it just abandoned that effort. Mayor Cantrell, when she came in, made her own attempt at it. Mm-hmm. And there were the top two candidates for it were in like an RFP process, and the city initially said that they wanted to go with a group that was backed by Drew Brees and a development group out of Colorado. But then it became apparent that the community out in New Orleans East was more inclined to favor a group backed by businessman Troy Henry, who lives out in the East. And so the procurement sort of went a direction that wasn't planned to begin with, and the Cantrell administration went with the Troy Henry group. That was last fall, and when the selection was made, and at that time they said that they wanted to do a lease with Mr. Henry's group by the end of the year that would transfer control of the site over to the group. That has not happened yet. in between times, there's been numerous city agencies that have been negotiating among themselves who will take ownership of the site. And that is just taking longer than what was expected. And a ground lease can't really happen until they've sorted that out. What they're saying now is that the ownership issue should be figured out by the end of June, and a ground lease hopefully by the end of summer. We'll see if they can stick to that.
So what is this doing then to the group, Troy Henry's group, to go ahead with their development proposals? Has that impacted them in any sort of way?
It's kind of hard to say. Mr. Henry's being understandably a little tight-lipped about it. What he's saying, what he's said to me is just that he's really just dependent on the city's processes and their own negotiations before he can do anything. He said that he does have some feasibility analyses going on, and that there's perhaps some vendors there that would be interested in participating in the development, but the details are really not very clear at this point.
And remind us real quickly again, what is he proposing to do with that?
It's a multi-phased project with many different elements. It's centered around a huge 1 million square foot warehouse. And then from there, he's talked about having like a family education center, a youth sports complex, a hotel, and many other sundry amenities. So we'll see what comes to pass. But the first thing that's got to happen is the ownership issue with the public agency.
With the land. Okay. Yeah. All right, Ben. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
All right, Charisse, over to you. And you had a story this week that is truly, it's just absolutely heartbreaking about the loss of 3 brothers, and the family lost them within a week's time to gun violence.
Yes, this was a story that really touched my heart about a year ago. And when you hear the story about the crime wave that's in New Orleans, and anyone really who is involved with crime, you feel for their families, especially hoping that they get some answers. But to lose 3 sons in 1 week in an act of violence and not basically go through silence for a year, it definitely is heartbreaking and devastating for the family. The Ville brothers were just recently new to the Central City neighborhood. They had only been in the neighborhood for a couple of months, moving there to be with their mother. As far as their father goes, they say they didn't have any issues with anyone. There were no problems, nothing that they had discussed. They said that these shootings happened at random and within 7 days of each other. And when you talk about that, it's 3 people that were together. These brothers were very close. We made sure to show that they were described as gentle giants, very sweet kids, who were just jokesters, who always played pranks on each other and their family members. And that's the way that they were described to us by all of their family members. But to lose all of them in 1 week and a year later not have an answer as to what happened or what led up to the shooting, or to not get justice for his son's murders, it definitely devastated their father.
Oh, it has to just be absolutely devastating, like you said, to them. And in the incidents, what happened was one brother was killed first, and then about a week later, the other 2.
Yes.
So can you describe what happened when the first brother was killed?
Well, according to the father, we spoke with their father and uncle, who they spoke in anonymity because there is still fear that the perpetrators are still out there. So our story, titled In the Dark, is quite literally and figuratively. We interviewed them in silhouette because they don't want to show their faces because the killers have not been caught. But the father said he received a call from one of his sons, his oldest son, who said that he was in jail. NOPD detectives said that they had to arrest them and charge them with battery on a police officer, but they were eventually released and the charges dropped because they were devastated at the shooting. They were walking down the street and someone opened fire on them from a car that was driving by. One of the other brothers was hit twice by bullets, the youngest brother. He was put in the hospital before he was also detained. Now, again, they were released and let go to their families, but they lost their brother right in front of them. And just a few days later, in the middle of planning the funeral for the oldest brother, they were gunned down, not maybe a half mile away from where that original shooting happened. According to police detectives, they say that there were NOPD crime cameras that we see placed all over the city there, but the crime cameras apparently did not catch the shooting in action. They said maybe it happened, if it had happened maybe a second later, it would have caught it, but it didn't catch anyone. But they did find the suspect's car. The suspect attempted to burn the vehicle to get rid of the car used in that shooting, but they swapped it for DNA, were unsuccessful in finding a possible match, so still no answers as to who killed these young men. And one of the young men who had recently had a child who is now 7 years old, I believe. And I spoke to that child's mother. She said that they are still devastated, still left without answers, only sort of conspiracies. And just to show you just how much fear they have in this family, when they planned the funeral, they did the funeral at the 9th hour. They invited only a few members of the family. They hired JPSO deputies to stand outside of the funeral because a year later, again, there is still just such a fear of not knowing who did this and why they did it. So this family is still in the dark, waiting to get more answers as to what happened to their kids.
Is the police department communicating with them a little bit more these days, particularly since your report?
I spoke with the family who shared email correspondence between every level of city government. They've spoken with Mayor Cantrell via email, Police Chief Sean Ferguson, even to DA Jason Williams, and Darlene Costanza with the Crime Stoppers organization. They've even spoken with cold case organizations. So them not having answers is not for a lack of trying. They've consistently pushed to get answers as to who killed these young men. But so far, you don't hear much from the police department because there are no answers to really give. And also you have to consider the fact that since that shooting happened, the Metropolitan Crime Commission reported nearly 300 shootings between then and now. So there are several cases that they're also trying to follow up on, and hopefully we hope to bring some attention to this case, because losing one child is already horrific enough, but to lose all of your children in 1 week is devastating for any family member.
Oh, really, our hearts go out to them, and I know this is just all the more excruciating since they don't know why, they don't know who.
Right, they don't.
All right, Charisse, thanks a lot. Very, very sad story. Okay, let's move on over now to Dawn, and something that many people in this community can relate to, allergies, and yet they just don't go away, it seems.
They don't go away, and they are getting worse. And if you feel like they're getting worse, it's not just in your head. Well, it is in your head. It's actually happening to your head. Over the last 3 decades in the United States, according to research, the pollen season has increased by 20 days, and the strength of that pollen has increased by 21%. There are lots of theories as to why. The one that seems to hold the most water with most researchers is that our temperatures globally are warming. And as we have warmer temperatures, things can grow faster and longer. And we also have a larger concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which helps photosynthesis, so plants are growing more and releasing more pollen. No matter what's causing it, it's most bad or worst in the Southeast and in the Midwest. So if you are feeling it stronger, you have very good reason to. About 60 to 70% of the population suffers from some form of pollen or environmental allergies. If you're one of the 30 to 40% who suffers from none of them, well, you're very lucky, because most of us aren't that way. But it's all seasonal. It starts off in Louisiana, usually with trees, and the pollen season really kicks off, usually, I'm told by local allergists, usually right around Mardi Gras, and then it peaks around Easter time, and it's usually better around Mother's Day. This year, it all felt a little bit longer. I talked with the allergist at Uptown Allergy and Asthma Center today, and she said she is seeing more patients complaining more. And she's not sure whether the pollen really is that much worse, whether we're seeing more of it this year than last year because people are mixing around a lot more. So you've got allergy sufferers mixed with common cold sufferers at the same time, and it's hard to tell who has what. The best way to know is truly to get allergy tested and know what you're sensitive to. If you then know what you're sensitive to, you can kind of watch on pollen.com or some other internet resources and find out when the season is going to be bad for you, because the best way to treat it is to start medicating a couple weeks out and really build up that medicine in your body so that you can fight it. So we went from tree pollen. We're still a little bit in tree pollen. That's February to June. Then we go into grasses from March through September, and ragweed in September. And also, as we're getting more and more humid, dust mites proliferate in our humidity. So anybody who's allergic to dust mites, they are very prevalent or becoming more prevalent now. And then grass pollens are popping up. And as we get later into the summer and we have those afternoon thunderstorms every single day and we have wet stuff on the ground, then we end up with mold that causes issues for people to as well. So
we just can't escape it.
We cannot escape it. A couple ways besides medication. If you've been out and about in the pollen, the best way is to wash your body and wash your clothes and get rid of that pollen. Masks, love them or hate them for COVID, they actually do keep pollen out of your nose and mouth. And the worst time of day for pollen is from dawn until about mid-morning. So if you can avoid being outside during those times, great. If you can't, flush your nose with saline products and take your medicine and try to grin and bear it.
Yeah, and you know, in this day of COVID too, when somebody gets a runny nose or you start sneezing or a scratchy throat,
you can't sneeze or cough without anybody thinking it's COVID right now.
Yeah, well, even someone themselves, getting concerned about it. So I guess, keep those COVID tests handy too.
Keep them handy and reach out for help. Doctors really are able to kind of help figure out whether it's allergies or a cold or COVID. And if you let it linger too long, those allergies or cold turn into sinus infections and they get worse. So.
Okay, well, all we can do, like you said, is just sort of deal with it, take care of ourselves as best we can. All right, thanks a lot, Dawn. All right, Ben, let's go on over to you because there is a program that's actually happening right now. It's a guaranteed income type of program, but for young people between the ages, of 16 to 24?
16
in the
to
city
24.
of New Orleans. Tell us about that.
So there's two guaranteed income programs going on at the moment, but the one that has been more publicized is for people between the ages of 16 and 24 that a term of art is opportunity youth. So this refers to people in that age range who don't have employment or don't have a school. And this is a privately funded program with a $500,000 grant from a group called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, which is just a network of mayors, which Mayor Cantrell is part of, that is backed by the Twitter co-founder, Jack Dorsey. So it's sending grants of various sizes, but similar to what is coming to New Orleans, $500,000, to try out and see how this works of guaranteeing a certain monthly income to people who fit that description. This has been going on in a number of different cities across the country for some time. It just started in New Orleans. There'll be 125 people participating, and the people participating will get like a debit card with $350 a month.
For how long? For how many months?
It goes on for 10 months.
Okay.
Yeah. And the results, this is all done for, certainly to help the people participating now, but I think that the greater purpose for the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income group is to study the effects of this. They're doing it in partnership with the University of Pennsylvania to see if it can improve people's lives. And there's no restrictions on the spending. They can use it however they need or want, and the results will be what they are.
And there's another program too, right? There's a separate program, and it's been going on for a little bit longer for less amount of money.
Right. So there's also a program. This is the administration hasn't released as much information about this, but it's being done in partnership apparently with MasterCard, and the target population there is both youth and senior citizens, and they get a similar type of debit card for $200 a month. It also allows people access to NORD facilities. It's a step toward something else that has been batted around, which is something like a municipal ID card that would allow you in public transportation, NORD facilities, and other kinds of city resources. but there's also this income component to it that apparently MasterCard is sponsoring.
And so how are participants selected?
So for the first one that has been more publicized, that is done through 9 partner community organizations such as the Youth Empowerment Project, the Louisiana Center for Children's Rights. They help select, they supplied lists of individuals who fit the criteria. Those lists were sent to the University of Pennsylvania, where researchers then selected them at random.
Okay. All right. So this program is going on, and then there's that other one too. Is there going to be any sort of evaluation to see how this worked?
Well, that's a good question. So typically, I think what Mayors for a Guaranteed Income wants is for the recipient city to appoint like a research fellow. It's actually in the contract that they're supposed to do that. In New Orleans, they're not doing that. The administration officials say that they had an agreement with the MGI folks that instead of having a dedicated research fellow, they would just have the partner organizations administer surveys in coordination with the academic researchers at University of Pennsylvania. So that's just a little bit different for here. It's hard to say why. I mean, I think the administration would say that New Orleans is different, that there's trust issues with outside researchers coming in, or at least that's what they've said.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but conservatives probably don't like this kind of a program that's basically saying it's like a welfare, give money to people who are not working, right?
Tyler, I would think that is you're more qualified to answer that than I am, being the ACE state politics reporter.
Well, we will see how these programs work out, and certainly to get the best data, you do have to have some sort of scientific evaluation. So we'll see how this all goes. Okay, guys, now it's time for other stories. So we will go first over to Tyler.
Sure. As we discussed, the legislature ends its session on June 6th, but what's coming up next week, there'll be a greater focus on the budget. Legislators have more money to spend probably than they've ever had before, thanks to the federal money and the stronger economy than expected. So one of the big questions is whether the legislature is going to give the $500 million to help start the funding for the new bridge over the Mississippi River in Baton Rouge.
Okay. Charisse, over to you.
As you know, 2 years ago, we started the Talk, a hard conversation about race in America, and that conversation has continued. We've expanded from the Talk conversation to taking a look at institutionalized racism and how practices like redlining help shape some of the communities of the city of New Orleans. So that is another project that we're currently working on, and hopefully we can have some answers connecting it to also the Gordon Plaza residents and their fight, decades-long fight, to be removed from an area that was built on a toxic landfill.
All right, thank you. Dawn, real quick.
Back to COVID, we're experiencing what looks to be a post-Jazz Fest bump in COVID numbers. There are other cities that have experienced bumps since the Omicron surge. So far, nobody's resumed mask mandates or anything like that, but just watch your symptoms.
Okay, Ben, to you.
The city any day now is due for its second installment from the American Rescue Plan Act. This is President Biden's stimulus funds for cities. It's a lot of money, $190+ million in the second installment. It's supposed to be coming, but now we don't know when it's coming, and we also don't know what the administration plans to do with it. So I'm curious to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, we all are. Okay, thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us, too. We'll see you again next week from Informed Sources. Have a good evening.